Good morning, Dove.
Good morning. Good morning, folks.
Yes, thank you. Better? Okay, so we're in the top of 18A, second line, and we're discussing the details of the period following the one day of Shavuos on which you can still offer the Chagigah sacrifice, which there were three views actually. One is it can only be on the day of Shavuos itself. Then there's something called Yom Kippur, the day of slaughter, which by some is considered to be a single day after Shavuos, and it can change depending on the day of the week. If it's Shabbos, then it's the following day or whatever. But the prevailing view is that it's 7 days, beginning on the first day of Shavuos, that you can offer the Chagigah. So we had yesterday a couple of sources for this law. And here Reish Lakish comes with the third one. Reish Lakish, second line on 18a. This is similar to what we saw yesterday, identifying a day of Sukkot, of Pesach, which is both a holiday and meaning that you can offer the Chagigah, and it's the day on which you can do harvesting. So here we have a similar thing. That's the festival of harvesting fruit, right? Of picking fruit. What day, what holiday is it that you can you celebrate the holiday and at the same time you can be harvesting fruit? That must be Shavuos, right? Shavuos is the when you start, you've got the Bikurim, right? You start with the period of Bikurim, the first fruits that you bring to the temple. So we're identifying that as the day which is both a chag, a festival, and Katsira, you do your fruit picking. Now, Amos, how does this work out? Are we talking about the day of Shavuos itself? Katsira b'yom tov mishari? No, you can't be, because you're not allowed to pick fruit on Yom Tov. So what is the holiday in quotes? It's not the holiday of Shavuos itself, but it's the holiday period during which you can offer the Chagigah, right? And the word Chag is, of course, indicates not only the idea of the festival, but the idea of the Chagigah, of the festival sacrifice. So, in other words, there must be a day that is not Yom Tov, which is still part of this period of Chagigah for Shavuos. Rabbi Yochanan says, El Me'atah, but if that's the case, Chag HaAsif. Sukkot is called Chag HaAsif, right? The festival of gathering in the harvested grain from the field, right? One holiday is it that includes gathering? That is Sukkot, right? So one would be Elay of Yom Tov. You can say on the holiday of Sukkot, Malach of Yom Tov Mishar, you're not allowed to do this carrying in of the gathering of the grain. Ella b'chol Shemor, it must be Chol Hamoed, right, of Sukkot. But Chol Shemor Mishar, you're still not allowed to do harvesting on Chol Hamoed. So it must mean like not the day on which is a holiday and you can also gather things, because there is no such holiday, right? The whole period of Sukkot, you're not allowed to harvest. So it means the festival of the harvest period, right? So you would have to say that the same thing applies to Shavuos. Not that it has to be a day of Shavuos or of celebrating Shavuos on which you can gather your fruits, on which you can pick your fruits. No, it means the festival that comes in the season of fruit picking. So it's not a good proof that Reish Lakish brought. So anyway, but from this last thing about Sukkos Michlal to Tavayus Virulhu to Chol Shmoed Asar B'Siyas Malacha, it was taken as given that that you can't gather your grain on Chol Moed Sukkos, right? That Chol Moed has prohibitions on doing malacha. Where does that come from? Well, this is a great question because we just spent we spent a month studying Moed Katan, and we took that for granted, right? That there is a prohibition on restrictions on malacha during Chol Moed. So what's the source for that? The Tanarabana. So we have a brisa. As Hagamatzos Tishmar Shivas Yamim. So this is kind of the juxtaposition of two verses. Or two phrases. As Chag Matzos Tishmar, you should keep the holiday of Matzos, that's Pesach. Shivas Yamim Tochal Matzos Asher Tzivisichas. For 7 days, you should eat matzos, right? But it's just taking the juxtaposition of the words Shivas Yamim and Tishmar, 7 days, and you should keep the festival. They are juxtaposed. That tells you that the whole 7-day period of Pesach is you're not allowed to do malacha. That's Rabbi Yoshi's view. That's the source. Rabbi Yonasan in the Zohar, Rabbi Yonasan says no, you don't need that verse. Kal v'chomer, you could do it from a logical inference. This is a bit of a strange proposition, and the Gemara is going to knock it down anyway, but just to go through it. So the first day and the 7th day of Pesach, they're not sandwiched by holidays, right? The first day, obviously the day before the first day does not have any restrictions, and the day after the 7th day does not have any restrictions. But those days are forbidden, you have restrictions on malacha. Right, so chulo shamoy sheyesh kedusha lifnei malachreim b'chol moed, which is sandwiched by holy days, right, by days in which you can't do malacha. And sheyaser b'siyas malacha should also, you have to infer that they should also be malacha. Now this is a very strange assertion because, hello, the Torah tells you that the first day and the 7th day you can't do malacha. It doesn't say anything about the middle days, right? So, but anyway. The Gemara is going to try and knock it down in a logical by attacking the logical inference from another position. But look at the 7 days of the week. It doesn't mean the actual creation days. It means the days of the week, right? So would you say the same thing? Every day of the week has a Shabbos coming before it and a Shabbos coming after it. So does that mean you should infer that just the Shabbos is forbidden from doing malacha? The days of the week are by the same logic. You should say every day of the week has a prohibition of doing malacha. When we're talking about Siyas Malacha, of course, that's not true. You can work on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you can't use that logic about Chol Moed. So the Brisa says, well, wait a minute, but maybe you can, because Malasheshis may brachis, Shein ben Karban Musaf. We know there's something special about the days of Chol Moed. It's not that they're just regular days. There is a musaf, like they are identified as holidays, right? By having a musaf sacrifice, right? So there is something special about them. Every Sunday, every Monday and Thursday, as the Yiddish saying goes, there's nothing at all distinguishes them as a special day, right? They're just regular days. There's no musaf. But Chol Moed has a musaf, so maybe that's telling you that yes, you should use this inference, this logical inference that they're holidays and they have, Isra Malacha days before and after them. Therefore, they should also be usher, and they should have prohibitions against Malacha. So the Chol Moed has a special designation already. So maybe we should derive from their proximity to days where you don't do work that they also are forbidden work. So Bar says not a good proof. Because Rosh Chodesh Yechiach, look at Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh has a Karban Musaf, right? It has a Musaf sacrifice, so it's a special day, right? And there's a Shabbos before and after Rosh Chodesh, right? So. And yet Rosh Chodesh has no work prohibition. So the fact that something is so special that it has a Karban Musaf, a Musaf sacrifice, does not indicate that just because it's sandwiched between holy days, it also should be considered a holy day. So Mar says, wait, maybe you can indeed say that. Rosh Chodesh she'ein kori mikra kodesh. yeah, Rosh Chodesh has a Karban Musaf, but it's not so special, right? A Chol Hamoed day is called Mikra Kodesh, right? The whole week is called Mikra Kodesh. It's called a holy day, unlike Rosh Chodesh. So maybe that indicates a status that is high enough to be influenced by the sandwiching between fully sanctified days with Isra Malacha, and maybe the Chol Hamoed should still get Isra Malacha. So the answers. So that's it. So we do. So the Gemara ends up with saying that yes, this is a valid indication that Chol Hamoed, because it's such a special day that it's called Mikra Kodesh, and it's sandwiched between the first and last days of the holiday, which are have an Isra Malacha. That too indicates that they should have an Isra Malacha from a Kal V'chomer. Okay. We have another price. Don't do any work on these on the 7 days. This is talking about Pesach, I think, right? Yeah. So it doesn't say don't do work for 7 days, but it's juxtaposed with the phrase 7 days at the end of the previous phrase. So we're linking through the juxtaposition, the 7 days with the Kol Malach Lo Tasu. Don't do work, and we're applying that to. There's another way that you would apply that to Chol Hamoed. So says Rabbi Yosef Lili. Rabbi Kiva Omer, but Rabbi Kiva says, sorry, you don't need that. Harehu Omer, because you have an explicit verse. Eila Moedei Hashem. In introducing in Vayikra, when the Torah lays out the rules for all the holidays, in introducing that section, it says Eila Moedei Hashem Mikra Kodesh. These are God's holidays that are called holy. What's it talking about? In Barishon, if we're talking about the first day of Sukkot, Harik Varnemar Shabbos. It's already stated specifically that day is a holiday on which you can't do malacha. In Bashmini, if we're talking about Shmini Atzeres or Farnar Shabbos, it's also stated specifically that is a day on which there is no work. So what must it be talking about? I'm sorry, I misidentified the pasuk. The pasuk is in Rei when it sums up the. I think when it sums up I was right the first time. Take it back. So it's already, you already have specifically the prohibition against work on these days. So what's it accomplishing by introducing it with Eila Moedei Hashem Mikra Kodesh? These are God's holidays, which are holy. So what does that mean? To teach you that indicates that there's something else, that there are other days which are forbidden from doing malacha, and those must be the intermediate days, the Chol Hamoed days. So he got lots of sources for this idea. So definitely you shouldn't do any work on Chol Hamoed, because we've gotten so far like five sources. Chagigah, which is kind of funny because it is, as we noted as I noted in Moed Katan, it's a rule which is often honored in the breach, right? There's, a lot of people I know, and I include myself, don't really pay much attention to the prohibitions against work on Chol Hamoed, with the exception of certain things like haircuts, which is not related to work, really, it's related to preparation of Yontif and laundry. But generally speaking, the things that usually we consider the touchstone of keeping Shabbos, like turning on lights, watching TV, cooking is okay. Anyway, so it's kind of funny that there are so many sources for the prohibition, and yet it's not one of the more kind of widely honored prohibitions in the Torah. Tanya, we have yet another brisa. 6 days, this is talking about Pesach, obviously. 6 days you eat matzah, and on the 7th is another holiday, like a how do you translate atzeres? Staying over, right, or an additional day to God. So mashvi yatzor, just as the 7th day, there is some way in which you are holding back for God. So it links the 6 days to that as well, that you're holding back in a way there. So we're taking that to mean that you're also not doing malacha on those days. So, but the Brisa says maybe all malacha should be forbidden on Chol Hamoed, but that's not the case. Talmud Lomar, because remember in Moed Katan, in Moed Katan, we had the idea that that the Torah forbids malacha, but not all malacha. It leaves it to the rabbis to determine which things are forbidden, which things are permitted on Chol Hamoed. So why is it not like a regular yontif? If you're going to say Chol Hamoed, you're not allowed to do malacha. It should mean all malacha, right? So the answer is no. Specifically, it states that the seventh day is the full atzeres, the full leftover day. The other 6 days of Chol Hamoed are linked to not doing malacha, but they don't have the same exact rules. This is a source that the Torah gave the authority to determine what malacha is forbidden on Yom Tov to the rabbis. To tell you which day is a Yom Tov day, which is everything is prohibited, and which day is Chol Hamoed, where some things are permitted and some are not. And which activities are prohibited and which are permitted on Chol Hamoed. Okay. So as I said, lots of reasons to know that, lots of ways to know that there are restrictions on Chol Hamoed. Last thing in the Mishnah was in Mutar and Behas B'Datanis, you're allowed to, if in the case of the day after Shavuos, which was called the slaughtering day, right? When a lot of people would make up their obligations. And if that fell on in such a way that it would indicate that that was the Shavuos day according to the Sadducees, right, which was different than the rabbis, then the rabbi said, you know what? Ordinarily, this slaughtering day would be considered like a festive day, right? That you wouldn't no eulogies, no fasting. But since in the case where it is falling out on the day that the Sadducees actually celebrated Shavuos, we want to make a distinction and say, you know what, no way this is Shavuos. You can even fast, you can even do eulogies. So that was the Mishnah. So as not to support at all the idea that you count, you set the date differently than the rabbis. So the more questions is Vatanya, but we have a Brisa. Masing Mes Alexa below. This guy Alexa, have no idea who he was, but he died in Lod on Shavuos, and it must have been it was on Shavuos, clearly. Everybody came to eulogize him. Rabbi Tarfon wouldn't allow them because it was Shavuos. So wait a second, Yom Tov Sokadatach. Like, who would have thought to come and eulogize on a holiday on Shavuos itself? That's ridiculous. Ibi Yom Tov Mikasu, who's going to come on Shavuos? It was the day after Shavuos. It was the slaughtering day, right? The designated day for slaughtering the Chagigah when you couldn't do it on the day itself. So if that's the case, Reb Tarfon would not let them eulogize, right? So what's up? Like, how come our Mishnah says that you do allow eulogies specifically on this Yom Tovah, on the slaughter day, and Rabbi Tarfon forbade them? Well, Kashigmor says no problem. Come Yom Tov Sholios Achar Shabbos, come Yom Tov Sholios V'Shabbos. If in the Brisa we're talking about, the Brisa of Rav Tarfon, we're talking about where Yom Tov fell after Shabbos, right? So Yom Tov was on Sunday. So then on Yom Tovah was the following day on Monday. So then he wouldn't let them. He would not let them eulogize because it was a festive day. But in the case of our Mishnah, we're talking about where it's the opposite, right? Where the Yom Tovah coincided with the Sadducee Shavuos, and that's why they would specifically permit eulogies. Okay. Okay, on to the next Mishnah. 18b. So now we are switching gears completely to talk about Tuma. So those Tuma fans should be very pleased, but I'll give just a little introduction because there's a lot of rules here that we may have forgotten the details of. So first of all, there are levels of Tuma, right? So there's the Viavosa Tuma, the granddaddy of Tuma, which is the, let's say, a corpse, the dead body itself. And anyone who touches that becomes an Avha Tuma, right? The father, literally, of Tuma, right? That's a biblical thing. And then anybody who touches him becomes a Rishon Tuma, a first degree Tame. And then it goes down to levels 2, 3, and 4, which are all rabbinic. Okay, there's no beyond that. There's no Torah Tuma. There's no Torah rules of Tuma. Everything else beyond that is rabbinic. And what do these things apply to? So, if we're going to consider, they apply only to food, but there's different kinds of food. There's like regular food called chulin, right? Where there's nothing special about it. So that can become a rishon tuma, a first degree tuma. Then there is maser sheni and then there's maser sheni, which has to be eaten in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and it has to be eaten in the state of Tahara. So the rabbis decreed a rabbinic level of tuma that applies to it to make people be more kind of cognizant of its status and the need to treat it, to only eat it, to keep it tahar. Then the next level is truma, the tithes given to the Kohen, and those can become a shlishi latuma. Those can have even an additional level of indirect degrees of separation from the source of the tuma. So that doesn't apply to regular food or maser sheni, but truma can become a shlishi, and then kodesh, which is consecrated food from a sacrifice, that can even become another level down. And then finally, mechatos, the water that is used in the ritual of the paraduma, of the red heifer, that's used to purify people who have become tamei. So that requires even an additional level of rabbinic tuma to kind of grant it an even higher status. Okay, so the Mishnah says, one more thing about tuma, which is, from the Torah, if you touch something that's tamei, right, your whole body becomes tamei. And how do you remove it? You go to the mikvah, right? You immerse your whole body in the mikvah. But there's a rabbinic idea of your hands only being tamei. Now, again, biblically, there's no such thing. It's it's all or nothing, right? But the rabbis decreed in their kind of protection of things, and also for a couple of other reasons, they decreed that your hands could become tamei. And how do you remove that tuma? By washing your hands. You don't have to go to the mikvah and immerse your whole body. If only your hands are rabbinically tamei, then you just wash your hands. Okay, so the Mishnah says, if your hands become tamei, then you can just wash them in order to eat regular food, chulin, or maser sheni, the tithe that had to be brought to Jerusalem and eaten in Betara, and for truma, for the tithe of the Kohen, u'lachodesh matbilin. But if your hands became tamei to the degree and you wish to eat consecrated food, then you can't just wash your hands in the sink. You have to wash your hands in a mikvah. All right, so we're adding on kind of a layer of additional stringency about how to become tahor, tahor enough to handle consecrated food. And if you're going to handle the chatos water, the water of the red heifer, so then then the rabbis applied where they would ordinarily say only your hands are tamei, regarding the ability to handle the mechatas, the paraduma water, then they consider your whole body tamei, not just your hands. Okay, so next rule, Tavel l'chulin huchzak l'chulin. If you need to go to the mikvah because you are tamei and you want to eat chulin, now strictly speaking, you don't have to do that. The tamei person is allowed to eat, right? But there was a custom among people who became called prushim that they would try to only eat any food in the state of tahara, right? So such a person says, "Oh, I'm tamei and I want to have lunch, so I'm going to go to the mikvah first because I want to have my lunch." Then his intention was only to become tahor with regarding his regular food, his chulin, right? If he then wants to go eat something that has has a more stringent level of treatment, like truma or kodesh, then that because his intention was only to purify himself to the degree that he could eat regular food, it doesn't count for him to be able to eat truma. Now, again, this is only rabbinic. In the case of Torah law, it's binary. Either you're tahor or you're tamei. You go to the mikvah, you become tahor for all purposes, for all aspects. But the rabbis, again, this is an additional level of stringency that they inserted that, like, you have to have in mind why you're going to the mikvah. And here come some more rules on this of this nature. So tavel l'chulin huchzak l'chulin. If you went to the mikvah to become tahor in order to eat your lunch, then that works for your lunch, but not asur l'maser. But you can't eat something that has a more strict rule about it, like maser sheni. Tavel l'maser huchzak l'maser. But if you went to the mikvah in order to be able to eat maser sheni, but you weren't thinking about eating consecrated food, and then you had the opportunity to do so, doesn't count. Asur truma or truma even. Anything that's a higher level, like truma, you can't eat it. You have to go back to the mikvah thinking, oh yes, and I'm doing this for truma. Tavel truma. Similarly, if you went to the mikvah in order to eat truma, then that's fine. But asur l'kodesh, you can't eat sacrificial food. Tavel l'kodesh, huchzak l'kodesh, asur l'chatas. And if you went to the mikvah to be able to eat consecrated food, then that's fine. But you can't touch the mechatas. Okay, and tavel l'chamor mutar l'kal. But if the converse, if you went to the mikvah in order to handle the mechatas, that's the strictest level. Then that include, even if that was only your intention, that includes all the lesser, the less strict things. So you could eat truma, and you could eat kodesh, and you could eat whatever you want. Now, what about tavel v'lo huchzak? What if you just went to the mikvah without any intention? You just went for a swim in the ocean, let's say. So ki'ilu lo tavel. So then, again, biblically, that's fine. You don't have to have any intention. As long as you went into the water, you're good. But rabbinically, it's not. It doesn't count. Now, big day am haaretz midras lepushim. So we have this rule about clothing, that if you are, let's say, a zav, right, and you sit on some clothing, then that becomes, it's called tamei midras. It's like something that's being stepped on or supporting your weight. So those clothes become tamei, and that can make somebody else tamei. Now, there were these, as we've seen all over the Gemara, there was kind of classes of people. There were people that were considered sometimes called chaber, sometimes called prushim. These were people who were careful about being tamei. So you can, if someone is careful about the rules of tuma, then you can assume that the clothes he's wearing, he's careful about keeping them tahor, right? But somebody who is an amharetz, who is just an ordinary person, and they were not considered, not trusted to be particular about the rules of tuma and tahara. So you have to assume that their clothing, they might have sat on a piece of clothing while in the state of tuma, and so all of their clothing you must consider to be in that state of tuma. But it applies the same thing for all these levels. Big day prushin midras lachay truma. What if you are just like a regular person who is careful about eating all your food b'tahara while you're tahara, but you're not. Let's say you're not a kohen. You're not habitually eating truma, right? So you would not be careful to only handle truma in a state of tara, right? So sure, we trust you that that if your clothing became tame, you would take them to the mikvah before using them to eat regular food. But since you're not accustomed to handling truma, that your only intention is that, and we need to be more strict about truma. So your clothes are considered tame with regard to somebody who eats truma, who habitually eats truma. Big day ochle truma midas lakodesh, and the same thing if a person's a kohen and he's a truma eater, but doesn't have much to do with sacrificial stuff. Maybe he's a kohen in training, or maybe he's too old to do the avodah, so he doesn't typically eat sacrifices. He eats truma. So we know that he's going to be careful about his clothing being tahor when he eats truma, but not when he eats kachim. So you who eat kachim, if you touch his clothes, you have to consider yourself, again, this is all rabbinic, you have to consider yourself tame. Big day kodesh midas lachatos, the same rule applies for people who eat sacrificial stuff, but they don't tend to handle the paraduma water. Same rule. Yosef ben Yozer, a chassi shebehuna. Yosef ben Yozer was like the real from Kohen. And yet, his handkerchief was considered tame when it came to people who were eating sacrificial stuff. So I guess it's a little strange because Kohanim typically, I would imagine, were eating sacrificial stuff, right? So I'm not sure what's the situation with the Yossi ben Yozer. I mean, all the Kohanim must have eaten truma, you would assume, because that was their source of how they got anything to eat. They weren't farmers, so all of their food was basically from truma, from the tithe. But they weren't all necessarily involved in, if you didn't live in Jerusalem in particular, if you never went to Jerusalem, you would never have eaten sacrificial food because that was only eaten in Jerusalem. So even though this Yosef ben Yoezer was a very frum Kohen, still his clothing would have been considered generating tuma for people who ate kachim. Yochanan ben Gudgada ochel al taras hakodesh chol yamav, and this Yochanan ben Gudgada, he ate his whole life. He ate all his regular food, in the state of Tara. Nonetheless, he didn't escape this category. His clothing would have been considered tame for somebody who ate kachim. Okay, so now we're asked, why do you even need that? Wash your hands for chulin and maser shein, right? There's no such rule. He will ask from the following brisa: truma bikurim chayalim misa. For truma, the tithe, and bikurim, which is the first fruits, if you're not a kohen and you eat them, so you are liable to the death penalty. It's not meted out by the court, but I think this is a God will strike you down kind of penalty. The chomash, and also you have to pay the 20% fine for misuse or mishandling, for misappropriation of the truma. You weren't supposed to, it doesn't belong to you. You weren't, so for eating it, you get the death sentence, and B, for misappropriation, you have to pay the 20% fine in addition to the original value of it. The Yasser Lazarim, and there are Truma and Bikurim are forbidden to be eaten by non-Kohanim, and their personal property of the Kohen. Now, what happens if they get mixed together with regular stuff? So if it's 100-to-1 ratio or greater, then it's negligible enough that you don't have to worry about it. But if it's less than 100-to-1 ratio of regular stuff to truma, then the whole batch has to be considered truma. And this is what's relevant to us. They require hand washing before handling them. The Hariv Shemesh, and also a person who is Tameh, and he has gone to the mikvah already, but he just has to wait until the end of the day to become completely tahor. He can't yet eat truma. So Harei Lubatruma Bikurim, these are laws that apply to Truma and Bikurim, to the tithes and the first fruits, Masha'en can be Maser, but they don't apply to Maser Sheni. Again, Maser Sheni is the tithe that you took to, that you could consume yourself, but you had to take to Jerusalem and eat it there or spend its money, its value there. And certainly hand washing is not required for regular food, right? So our Mishnah indicated that that you do wash your hands for regular food and for Maser Sheni, and this Brisa says not so. Kasha Maser and Maser, Kasha Chulin Achulin. So it contradicts our Mishnah in both regarding Maser Sheni, and Chulin, and regular food. So what's the deal? Okay, I can understand. I can answer the question about Maser. It's not contradictory. We already know that there are two views on this. We have a Mishnah called anything that the rabbis required it to become, to be immersed, to become tahar. Like it's technically by biblical law, Torah law, it's already tahar, but the rabbis decreed tuma for it, and it has to be taken from the mikvah. So Natami is HaKodesh, so included in that extra stringency of the rabbis, it makes kachim, makes consecrated food tameh. Uposto also truma, and it also invalidates truma. Umuter l'chulin maser. But it's fine for, it doesn't have any additional strictures if it is regular food or Maser Sheni. Divrei Meir, that's from Meir's view. So that would accord with the brisa that we just brought. But the rabbis say, Osrim b'Maser. The rabbis say, well, that might be true for chulin, for regular food, but for Maser, you still have to wash your hands, or it still becomes tameh. And so that would accord with our Mishnah. Right, so we already have these two views. But what about chulin? Chulin kasha. We haven't yet found a view that states that chulin you could eat it without being tahor, and consequently you wouldn't have to wash your hands. Where it says lo kasha kam b'chila kam b'negia. Oh, that's different. Regarding eating, our Mishnah is talking about eating, so you have to wash your hands if your hands are tameh. And the Brisa was talking about just handling. So touching it is less. Maskil or Shimi Barashi or Shimi asked, I can only plead Rabban later Rabbi Meir the Maser. The rabbis did not dispute Rabbi Meir, only eating about Maser. But touching Maser or eating chulin, locally. The rabbis don't argue with Rabbi Meir. They agree with Rabbi Meir that it's not so stringent. So that would still contradict our Mishnah. So what are we going to say? We're talking about eating the food. There's no contradiction between the Brisa and the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about eating bread. Bread, you have to wash your hands even for chulin. As we do, right? That is our current practice, right? The people will wash their hands before eating bread. But just having fruit or a snack or whatever, then the Mishnah would not require that, and the Brisa does not. And that's what the Brisa is talking about. Not talking about eating bread, but eating regular food, other foods, and then that our Mishnah would also agree can be done without washing hands. Rav Nachman says somebody who washes their hand even to eat fruit, he's going overboard, right? That's more strict than you need to be. Okay. I think it's a good place to stop right here. I'll pick it up here tomorrow.
Thank you, Dov. Does anybody know where the demonstration is today that the rabbi spoke about yesterday? Is the Russian consulate in Manhattan or up here in the Bronx?
Up here in the Bronx, I believe.
Okay. Thank
Up
you.
on Mashalu. There was an email sent out, I think late last night.
At 11 a.m., I believe, James?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. I'm
Have a
going to
good day.
stop by.
Have a good day, everybody.
You too.